Good afternoon, good evening, and welcome to our DGIQ Encore on data governance communication. Today, Ron, our senior data governance architect, is going to be discussing the communication type, timing, steps needed to ensure a successful data governance program. We will be using a Mentimeter for a few interactive polling questions throughout the webinar. To participate, simply scan the QR code on the screen with your phone's camera or go to www.menti.com and type in the code on the screen. The questions will appear later during our webinar, and the code will be displayed again. Before I turn it over to Ron, I do want to remind everyone that your cameras are turned off and you are on mute. I will be monitoring the chat function, so please feel free to submit your questions at any time during the presentation. With that said, I will turn things over to Ron.
Thank you, Shamiza. Hi, I'm Ron Zurawski. I have a data background that includes 8 years of database administration and architecture, 8 years of business intelligence, and about 10 years of data governance. For today's presentation, I'm going to segment it into two parts. The first part is to set the stage for the Data Governance Office, and the second part is to get into the details of the communication. So if please increment the slide. All right, thank you. So for a data governance office, I'm going to assume that you have sponsors at the executive committee. You have communications with the business owners. You have data governance analysts that are assigned to the data governance office and work with subject matter experts and data stewards, as well as DBAs, architects, and projects. They also monitor data quality, data lineage, and what goes in and out of the business glossary. Next slide, please. For data governance communications, I'm assuming that you have, pardon me, a static website that allows folks to go and look at things like the charter or the current roadmap that you're working at. I'm assuming that you have a area where you can put periodic communications, for example, a SharePoint. They would contain things like historical data quality reports, data lineage reports, etc. Next slide, please. For the data quality program, I'm assuming you're using a standard model. For example, you're having the business identify the CDEs, you're going through and profiling those CDEs, you're then taking those profile results and going with the subject matter experts to define what are the data quality rules to monitor this, what do we need to do to fix it before we start running the data quality rule, and then once it is up and running and we are monitoring, the organization is taking that information and giving it out so that individuals figure out what is it that I need to, pardon me, what I need to do to keep data clean. Next slide, please. For data lineage, I'm assuming you have an understanding of where does the data come from, where does it go to, how is it being transformed, and you are going through the organization and taking that information and historically saving it so that as an individual needs to go out and get that information, they can go out to your SharePoint and grab that information. Next slide, please. For the business glossary, are the data stewards and the business working your business terms? I'm assuming they are. I'm assuming that the DGO makes sure the glossary contains organizational relevant definitions, has the support information in place that is needed, and is turning around and making sure that your business terms are indeed associated with your physical assets. Next next slide, please. All right, for projects. Data governance is not static. Data governance evolves as the organization evolves. And how do you get ahead of what's going to come at you in the data governance group? You work with the projects. I'm talking about the strategic projects that your organization is doing and working on. Are they replacing a data lake? Are they putting in a new ERP system? That's going to impact what is in your glossary, your data quality rules, and your data lineage. Next slide, please. For training, your data governance analysts must be experts. They must know the processes, they must know the tools, and they must be cross-trained. Thank you. As far as the training, it needs to be both formal and informal. It needs to also go out to the business. Are you doing lunch and learns? Are there individuals who understand how to use your business glossary to retrieve the information? How are you getting them trained? Next slide, please. For compliance, it's important, but it depends on your industry vertical. So I'm going to go very lightly here. There's more information here. We could talk at another time, but we want to make sure that DGO is, for example, working with IT security to keep things safe. If you have outbound data or data that's leaving your organization and going to another organization, it's literally out of your control. Are you putting in some policies on data at rest, data in motion, and data getting destructed, pardon me, when it is no longer of value or has met its need? Next slide, please. Metadata review. How many projects have you seen where they get to the end of the project and there really is some cleanup that needs to be done, but we're out of money, we're on to the next thing, folks are being reassigned? We want to make sure that we as data governance are doing a metadata review, we're cleaning things up, and we have things that are relevant and not outdated in our systems. All right, let me pause here, give control back to Shamiza, and Shamiza will work on some questions.
Yeah, all right. So we are ready for our first interactive polling question. For those of you who are participating, please go to menti.com and go ahead and cast your votes. And you can go ahead and submit as many answers as you want. We'll go ahead and give everyone about 30 seconds to go ahead and do that.
All right, data quality, business glossary, and training. Good, good. I've structured this so we're going to look at data quality and data lineage in great detail. That's excellent.
And just a reminder, if you have any questions at all, please enter them into the Q&A function in the chat.
All right, looks like voting is closed and we're going to go ahead and continue. So I'll start with the data quality and the data lineage that we just saw that everyone's interested in. Let's talk about communicating with data quality. Let's assume you have the program I talked about earlier. You identify, you profile, you review with the business. You have these rules in place, they're running, and now you're seeing results. How are you going to communicate that back to the organization? What's a good way to do that? I'm talking in the plan here at the bottom of the slide about putting in graphs by domain. How many rules do you have, etc. Let's go to the next slide, please. In this case, I've shown a possible, pardon me, data quality communication. And let's, in this communication, put in number of rules that we're monitoring, number of rules that are in development. If you have rules that you're not going to do anything with, and a lot of organizations say, look, if my data quality is such that less than 2% of my data in a specific data column is an error, I'm not going to mess with it. Your results may vary, your organization may have different needs, but I show that as the red line on the graph at the bottom of the screen. And so we've got rules, they have errors that are showing, but we're not going to do anything with them. We also have rules that are above that red line, and there's an issue. Let's talk about what is the issue, what have we done, or what are we doing in this communication. So let's go and take a look at the graph in a little more detail. Next slide, please. So if you look at this graph, on the left side, I've gone through on the y-axis and I've put everything in percentages. And on the x-axis, everything is by date. And we can see that we have the rules by the different date. From oldest to newest. I've identified the new month because I'm going to use that as a part of the talk. How would an executive look at this? They would look over on the right. They would look at those rules. They would probably ask you about rule number 12, what's going on there. They probably wouldn't worry about rule number 2 or number 3. That's how some folks might look at it, but we're going to look at it a little differently. Let's go from left to right. Let's look at the green bars first, and we can see that we've had some issue with something called Rule 1 now. That's been going on every run, every week until the 1st of July. Well, it turns out on the 1st of July, we had a promotion to production. A project went into production, and a part of that was to clean up this data quality rule. And we can see that as of the 1st of July, it's no longer an issue. Now, let's look at rule number 2, going from left to right. It's the little blue rule, and we see that it's pretty steady over the last 6-7 weeks. And then last week, suddenly it was up. And this week it's up again. Is that something that is next week going to go over our threshold? Let's talk to the data steward today and see what's going on there. All right, rule number 3 is our rule that is in the yellow. And it's been steady, and even this last run that we had yesterday was steady, but last week we had it go up. Is this something I should talk to the data steward about or not? That's totally up to you. All right, let's talk about rule number 4. Rule number 4, we're seeing an error of 9.5%, and we're seeing that it's happening the first run of the month. Now, I've talked to the data steward, and the data steward is telling me, gee, Ron, you know, this is one of the data loads that's coming in from one of our contractors, and we've asked them to fix this, and they've turned around and they've said, you know what, we can fix this, but we want another $50,000 to go ahead and adjust the way we send you data. Now, we have a business analyst, and as soon as this rule comes in, he comes in on Tuesday morning and he runs again, and this rule goes back to 0. It straightens out the data they've sent us. So the question is, do we in this case wait until the end of the contract and renegotiate, or do we spend the money and have them fix it now? Case by case basis. Finally, I've got a rule number 12, which is the 12.5% rule, which is blue. And this rule has happened since we've had this promotion to production. And so I think we may have had an error with the ETL rule that's running behind it. I've gone to the data steward. They're working with the ETL folks. It looks like the ETL developer may have snuck something into production last week, and that's why our error is halved, but we don't know. All right, let's move on to the next slide and let's talk about data lineage. Again, for data lineage, how would we give that information to the organization? What should we do? Well, this is an excellent example for understanding how the different domains in your organization are working with each other and how things are progressing. So if we could go to the next slide, please. We can see that in our communication, what we're going to do is we're going to, by domain, have them tell you how many of these rules have been have a transformation, the light green, how many rules the light green plus the darker green are identified. In other words, I know where the data is coming from. I know where the data is going to. And then the red shows total number of elements in that domain. We may, as an organization, say, look, we want every domain to get to the point where we understand the lineage for 80% of the data movements. So we can see that domain number 1 is indeed meeting that goal, but the others are not. And in fact, we would ask domain number 4, it doesn't look like there's much being done there. You haven't identified any transforms. Is this a situation where you don't have transforms? But taking this particular graph and this particular communication and showing it to the executive committee or the data owner may or may not motivate a data steward to move forward and get more done. Next, communication. Business glossaries. I want to go lightly on business glossary. Obviously, we need to have all the CDEs in there. We need to understand what is the definition. We need to make sure the definition is correct. So let's go ahead and put together perhaps a graph like we used for data lineage or something similar where we can show each of the domains, how they're doing. Do they have a total number of business terms that they're anticipating? Do they have a number of business terms where they've entered the actual name, but they haven't done a thorough job of getting all of the definitions in, etc.? Let's go take a look at that. Let's put that together. I'm not going to show a graph. Let's go on to the next slide, please. Projects. Again, like I've said earlier, a project is where the future of data governance from a work perspective comes from. As your organization changes, your ERPs, your data lakes, your data warehouses, your reporting tool, the projects give good insight for the data governance group into what's coming. Let's take that information, let's summarize it. Oh, gee, this new system, they're going to deprecate 20% of the business terms. They're going to bring in a new methodology. We're going from a waterfall to an agile in our overall work, and we're adjusting our systems. We need to build some new data quality rules. What are the numbers behind that when you, as a data governance analyst, go in with the project and understand what they're doing? Let's get that in front of the committee. Let's get that in front of the data owners so that they understand we are busy. Next slide, please. Training. Again, how are we looking across the domains? Are the data stewards trained? Are they comfortable with the glossary? A lineage tool, if you have one, understanding how to use or find lineage, if you're just using spreadsheets, etc. Let's get that information out so the organization knows where we are. Next slide, please. Compliance. Compliance, again, is a tough area because it's different by vertical. Are you working with IT security? Are you trained in the processes? Are you trained in the tools that are being used? Let's get that on a slide and let's make sure the organization knows we are either good or we need some additional help. Next slide, please. Governance review. Again, if you are in a situation where a project seems to end early and there's still more work to do, let's get that into a slide. Let's make sure that we have dates and we have percentages. If we want to do a graph like data quality where we're showing progress over time, or do we want to keep it more static? Next slide, please. Communication frequency. if you have an issue with a data quality rule, data lineage, or something's coming at you, you want to get in front of that data steward, get the subject matter expert on board, and you want to get into there and figure out what's going on. Bi-weekly communications, you want to go and you want to turn around and let the data owners know on a periodic basis what's going on, summarize it, aggregate it, and then as far as the committee at the very highest level, have them take a look at how your overall program is going. Next communication. I'm sorry, next slide. All right, so make it flexible and relevant. Don't be sending out a report to somebody who's moved on, has a new job, and is no longer involved. Communicate often and early. I've got a problem with this data quality rule. I need people to help me. Make sure you offset that governance is not going to go through and be a project. It is something that is continuous. It's a program. As your organization changes, it changes. Leverage your marketing team. I had my marketing team put these slides together. They look a lot better than what I could do. Next slide, please. Thank you.
And we're on to our next interactive polling question. So once again, go to Menti, use the code on the screen above, and cast your votes. And we'll give everyone about 30 seconds to go ahead and take care of that.
Thank you.
And just a reminder, if you have any other questions you would like answered, please utilize the Q&A function right at the top of the chat. All right, I think we'll go ahead and move on to the next slide here. Oh, got another answer, data privacy.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Excellent. We can certainly go into those in more detail on another presentation.
All right, I'll go ahead and start reading off some of the questions in the chat here. First one, Ron, is how will these data quality results be translated to business value?
We are using data to make decisions. It's a thing that's occurring more and more in all businesses, I think. And as you have better data, you make better decisions. Better bottom line. I think I'm done answering that question.
Yes. If there are any other questions, please enter them into the chat. And if you have any other questions or you would like to set up a one-on-one meeting with Ron himself, please reach out to Ron using the email at the bottom of the screen.
Perfect. I look forward to it.
Awesome. Well, if there are no further questions, I want to thank everyone for joining today and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you all very much for attending.